Hi, I'm Emily Hardman from The Conscious Kitchen, and today we're going to be making truffles. They're a really easy, fast treat that you can do anytime, good for holidays or gifts. Today we're going to do a dark chocolate and olive oil truffle with Satsumas, which are these really great, beautiful mandarin oranges. You can use any citrus that's available to you. The only thing that you want to make sure of is that you're using an organic citrus because we'll be using the zest from it, so that area collects a lot of possible pesticides, which you don't want to be putting into your chocolates because they should just be full of good stuff. So most truffles traditionally start with a heavy cream, and they'll also have butter going on in there. We're going to make a dairy-free truffle, so it's good for anybody who wants to avoid animal products or anybody who has any intolerances to dairy at all. So we've got a cup of Vitasoy in the pot right now, and I'm just taking my microplane and removing the zest from this Satsuma, which we'll then set aside and eat later. It's just a little bit naked, but it's still totally edible and delicious. So just push the zest into the soy milk. You want to do 2 of the citrus. And put that back into the soy milk as well. And then I'm just going to give this a gentle heat. Soy milk, when it gets really hot, has a tendency to explode. Not explode really, but expand in great volume. And it would just boil right over. So we're going to bring this to just about a boil. And then what we're going to do actually is cover it with plastic wrap, with a lid, whatever you have handy, and let it infuse for about 10 minutes. So over here on this burner, I actually have a little pot of water, and it's got about 2 or 3 inches in it of water. And the water is not touching the bottom of my bowl here. You see, it's getting a little bit of moisture on the bottom, but that's just because the steam is coming up and hitting it. And so I'm just using the gentle steam from the water to heat up the chocolate. And it's just starting to melt really nicely over here. And this is just about done here now. Got a few chunks, but the heat of the chocolate that's surrounding it will melt that down nicely very soon. And this little sizzle over here indicates that soy milk is nice and hot. You can see it's just boiling, so we want to take the heat off that and allow that zest to infuse. So I'm just making sure I don't have any lumps in here, that it's nice and smooth. A good sturdy silicone spatula is nice for this because it does scrape off everything really well. Just want to make sure the chocolate is all kind of at the same temperature here. So I just stir it a little bit and let it sit. All right, so we have our soy milk infusing with the Satsuma zest, and the chocolate is completely melted. It's still rather hot. And I'm going to measure out now a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And you just want to be sure that it's an olive oil that you enjoy. So if it's not something that you would dip bread in and eat just as is, you probably don't want to use it for this because you will taste it. We're just going to pour that into the chocolate. I'm not going to worry too much about what's left over in my cup because it's actually going to benefit me in a second as I measure out a little bit of agave nectar, which is a sweetener. It comes from a cactus. And I'm going to do about 1.5 tablespoons of agave. And because agave is a syrup, it's a little sticky. It likes to stick to whatever you've put it in. And so you sometimes can have trouble getting it back out, which is why it's nice to do the oil first, sort of greases the measuring cup. That looks good. Then we'll take the infusion of soy milk that we've done. Now, at this point, if you like, you can just strain out the zest if you don't want any extra texture to the chocolate. I don't mind it. I kind of like the natural little bursts of flavor that it gives. So that's the cup of our soy milk. And of course, we've lost some volume from that as it's heated, and some of it has steamed away. In some recipes, when you're making a truffle like this, you'll definitely want to make up that difference. So you would take out the soy milk, put it back in the measuring cup, see how much liquid you've lost, and just compensate by adding a little bit more liquid. In this case, it doesn't really matter because we do have some additional liquids, and the loss has pretty much been compensated for. So what you're going to end up with is something that's kind of like a just unset pudding. You know, something where you're like, that pudding will set and it will be perfect. Not too hard. You want everything to be incorporated. You don't want to see any of the oil or any of the foam of the soy milk or any of the zest sitting up on top. And once you get it to that stage, you can leave it in this bowl. A bowl this size is great, or if you have a flat square pan, you can pour it into that pan and it will be flatter and thinner, so you will get a cool, even temperature throughout. And you just set that off to the side and let it harden up a little bit. So what we're going to do is move into tempering some chocolate. One, to spread across the top of the ganache, and then also to give us something to dip it in, to cover the truffles in chocolate. So this chocolate is nice and beautifully melted. And right now, it's about 125 degrees. It's really liquid, it's really shiny, it pours down nicely. You really do need a thermometer for this if you've never done it before, a kitchen thermometer. Any kind of thermometer that you have will work as long as it picks up lower ranges. Sometimes the deep fat fry thermometer will not pick up the ranges that you need for chocolate work. And what we're going to do now is take this hot, fully melted chocolate, and we're going to add a bit of seed chocolate to it. This is just regular chocolate. It looks kind of gnarly because this is actually chocolate that I reuse for seeding. And seeding just sort of helps bring this hot chocolate down to the temperature that we want it to be able to work with. So this process is called tempering, and we're just taking chocolate through a curve. Now each different kind of chocolate has a different curve that it needs to go through to be properly tempered. For dark chocolate, we're going to start at a high range, which is 115 to 125, somewhere in there, and then bring it down to 84 degrees, which is what we're doing right now. So we're cooling this stuff back down. So now it's at 84 degrees, and we're just going to take it back over to the gentle steam here, pop it back on the stove, and just stir it gently. Give it about 8 to 10 seconds. We're just really gently warming it back up. We want it to be about 89 degrees. And again, you'll just have to really kind of do it by feel and watch your thermometer as you're learning. That's about 10 seconds. Just want to take it off. And then I like to kind of test with a finger. You don't necessarily want to do this in all circumstances, but I can feel it that it's very close to my body temperature. Some people also put it right on their lips, which is delicious, and tells you that it's just about perfect. So we have the ganache that we poured into a 9x9 pan, and this one is lined with parchment, which just gives us something to hold on to take it back out so we can cut it. You can use whatever you like, wax paper, plastic wrap. And this has been, this ganache has been spread with a very thin layer, as thin as you can really, of tempered chocolate. And what that does is it gives us a base, because the ganache is very soft. So were we to just try to cut this ganache and dip it in our chocolate, which is somewhat warm, it would all just melt into itself. So this gives us something hard to work with the dipping fork. So I'm going to invert it and put that chocolate, that hard tempered chocolate, on the bottom and lift off the parchment. It's got a nice square here, and what we're going to do with it actually is cut it into small squares and dip it right into our tempered chocolate. And we want to pay attention now to a decorating option. just in terms of size. I've cut these tiny squares. These are acetate plastic, and it has printed on it a little cocoa butter design. And this will transfer to the chocolate that we are covering this truffle with. So we just kind of want to see what our size is that we're working with here. Looks like about 1 inch square. So as I cut the truffles, that's kind of what I want to be my guide, is how big that little transfer is. So now we have the truffle on the dipping fork with the hard chocolate, the tempered chocolate on the bottom, so it supports us. I'm just going to go over to the tempered chocolate, sort of gently set it in there. Use the fork to help you cover it, and pull along the bottom. And then just set it on some parchment. You can use a finger if you need to let it set. And we'll take that transfer. Make sure that the textured side is down. So you want to be able to just feel where that cocoa butter is, and gently press it so that it adheres to the chocolate. And then once that sets up, we'll just peel the plastic, the acetate right off, and the design will remain. So our chocolate has set, it's nice and firm and cooled, and all we're going to do is really gently just take the corner of the transfer sheet and pull it right back, and the design remains. And if you just want to neaten these up, it's very hard to do hand dipping and hand cutting and have them be perfect, so really don't concern yourself too much about that. You just want to be making something that's delicious and good. But you can go through and kind of trim the feet on it. Just take off a little bit of the extra chocolate that's overhanging, just to neaten it up a little bit. And then you're all set.